Let's bring in our news anchor, Thembekile Mrototo, who is monitoring these developments for us. Thembekile, a very good afternoon to you. So some explosive revelations in the last 30 minutes or so following the testimony by Advocate Johnson. Give us a sense then in terms of just some of these contentious issues that have been raised in as far as her relationship, which has been described as very deep and very personal by Advocate Silo.
Good afternoon, Nati. So we're now currently waiting for the conclusion of consultation at the request of Advocate Andrea Johnson, the former IDAC head, going to speak to her lawyers here because we've been dealing with her refusal, perhaps, if you can term it in those words, to answer certain questions. It's all to do with the allegations that she leaked a criminal docket, details of an investigation, a complaint against Major General Khan from crime intelligence that had been brought against him. And now that is now being, if you will, woven together with that close, very deep relationship that we are told that they had, that they during the course of their conversations on text message, words such as gorgeous, how they declared how much they missed each other, all of that has come up during this session. But Advocate Silo, the evidence leader, saying she does not want to flight those messages because there are in some instances references to minors, children. So let's talk to Canny Maphanga about where all of this is heading. That's SABC News senior reporter Canny Maphanga. So Canny, we are now at this point where we're finally dealing with the allegation that Advocate Johnson leaked a docket to Major General Khan. Let's talk about what that docket was about and how important this Khan link is in terms of what we have been dealing with here since she first appeared.
It's very important in terms of establishing the true intentions behind what IDAC was doing. Remember, I kept stating that in order to answer the question as to what could have possibly motivated IDAC in its cases within crime intelligence and against the PKTT, you'd have to turn back to allegations from her past as a senior public prosecutor. And we are seeing that in the past she is facing allegations from Witness O through that protected disclosure that she furnished Major General Faraz Khan with the contents of a criminal docket against him after she received it from a journalist, Barry Bateman, and that would have helped him or assisted him in, I guess, preparing for his warning statement that was set to take place that particular afternoon after she provided it. And we heard the audio of the altercation. So it was something quite serious. We were dealing with a case of intimidation and assault that had been opened against him, and she assisted him in that regard. And in her statement before the commission currently to answer to allegations where you find IDAC also seeing Major General Faraz Khan feature there to some extent, she tried to paint him as someone that she just knew of and someone that she didn't know on a regular basis, or at least didn't have.
She basically lied in her statement.
Basically, and it was a portrayal that wasn't accurate, let's put it that way. And effectively what the line of questioning has shown that they are very close in terms of their personal relationship, to the point where they have nicknames for one another, they talk about missing each other, and we see that Advocate Silo is even hesitant to share the text messages. We are used to seeing text messages between individuals, but these ones she's holding them quite tight and asking them to just answer based off what they see in the files. And really the concern here is about establishing the closeness of the two, because it establishes a relationship where they will do anything for one another. They'll go far and beyond, even inviting him to her office to discuss a personal issue that he has and allowing him to use that VIP entrance that is for the high-ranking officers. Now, if you marry the two, it could be plausible that the conduct that really doesn't make any sense in terms of it not having any legal, factual basis that she tries to distance herself from could be very much linked to that close proximity that she allegedly has with Major General Faraz Khan. Not even allegedly, because it has been established that they're quite close, and she agrees that they're quite close. If you look at the past conduct where Major General Faraz Khan is there, and you look at IDAC, particularly their cases in crime intelligence, and Major General Faraz Khan was mentioned in the statement that he was not included in the panel, it's clear that that friction about the appointment of Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo and the appointment of Brigadier Mokwele is something that could have been allegedly a concern by Major General Faraz Khan that could have been communicated to Advocate Andrea Johnson, and that could explain or inspire what really was taking place at IDAC and why they took such an interest, particularly within crime intelligence and, of course, the political killings task team. And it's about taking that closeness and linking it to these two events that are quite prominent to the evidence of Advocate Andrea Johnson and what she's implicated in, but they also feature a common denominator in both instances, and that is Major General Faraz Khan. So it's not so much what is in the text, but what the text represents, which is a closeness that these two definitely look out for one another. And it would be plausible if it would be suggested that what was taking place at IDAC or the pursuits of those cases, namely that of Brigadier Dineo Mukwege, could have allegedly been inspired by this closeness that she seems to share with Major General Faraz Khan.
And on that closeness, I mean, the texts are seemingly so damaging that, in fact, when the concession around the closeness of the relationship was eventually extracted out of her, it took Advocate Sello basically saying, please don't make me do it, don't make me flight these messages. And you've already led us halfway there in terms of the Khan Khumalo, shall we say, rift, rivalry perhaps. But do we know the real root of that, Canny? And ultimately, are we actually about to see another day of testimony basically circling back to right where we started regarding those bungled or perhaps even ill-motivated investigations by IDAC?
Well, there's always been this battle to control crime intelligence, and you see that in the messages of Major General Khan, or at least the ones that have been led before the commission, we see that wherever he feels a threat, he will launch a counter-attack. So it's someone that is very vested or interested or wants to hold on to his role within intelligence. And any sort of alleged threats to that, or any kind of incoming roles that could disturb the status quo, if we could put it that way, there seems to be some form of an alleged counter that is launched. You saw it with the instance of the journalist that was being surveilled, that is Marianne Tam. So it's evidence like that that leads you to the inference that perhaps this could have been about Major General Faraz Khan. And we don't take it lightly that Colonel Pariachi even mentioned in his statement that other generals could have been included in the evidence, such as Major General Faraz Khan. There are many generals in crime intelligence, but he made it a point to mention that particular name. And that is why I say he's a common denominator in both instances. And now that they've been able to establish the closeness between the pair, it's not completely implausible for the two to then be linked to the current events that are taking place at IDAC. And I think that's where the line of questioning is trying to get to, even though it's a bit of a painful exercise. But if they deal with this particular instance, and she has to explain now why she furnished him with that docket, it can only be because of that alleged close relationship. It could not have been for anything else, because that was solely to benefit Major General Faraz Khan, not Brigadier Bedley, not the complainant. If you listen to the audio, it's quite harrowing, that audio of the alleged intimidation and assault. And that information that she provided to him could only have served as a benefit, and it could only be read in terms of the past conduct and the kind of exchanges and personal relationship that they seem to share.
And we're still waiting, if you're just joining us, we're on an adjournment at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. We're waiting for the return of Advocate Andrea Johnson, the now former head of IDAC, to come back and continue testimony regarding her apparent leaking or alleged leaking of details from a criminal docket against Major General Khan, who, as of this afternoon, she has admitted basically they shared a very deep, very close relationship, those two words used by the evidence leader here, Advocate Sello. And Canny, just on that relationship, when Advocate Johnson says she set up a meeting with Major General Khan, she tried to pass it off as a regular visit to the IDAC offices by a VIP through the use of a special entrance, for example, that would have led to Khan showing up straight at the door of her office. But even then, when you look at why that meeting was set up, it's because, as you were saying earlier, he once again felt he was under some sort of attack, interestingly, from someone from the Hawks, which Advocate Johnson says she can say today was not the case. But that begs the question, how would she have known, and what sort of tools were applied to reach such a conclusion?
Actually, what's significant about that evidence is the manner in which he is called to her office. He's not there in his official capacity. He comes as in his personal capacity to make a personal request for a personal favor with respect to suspicions that he had of an alleged plot against him, allegedly the Hawks investigating him. It's the manner in which she brings him into the office through that side entrance so that there's no record of him being there. That is what gives it the significant red flag to the commission that there was some form of clandestine meeting that was taking place between the pair, but they knew each other far beyond what she represented in that statement to the Madlanga Commission, and the relationship is much closer than what she intended to portray. And it's quite significant because it is through that past event that you can possibly understand what could have motivated this very high interest in the internal affairs of crime intelligence and the South African Police Services as a whole. When you're seeing IDAC put all of its efforts into these matters and the alleged targeting of specific generals within the South African Police Services, it starts to connect as to what could have been the possible motivation surrounding these cases. We know that she rejects any claims of that particular nature, but like I did say in the beginning when Witness O first made that protected disclosure, that information is going to be quite critical to understanding why and how IDAC pursued these certain cases and why they had such an interest in bringing these matters to court.
And another interesting name, one that caught my attention certainly in the Khan-Johnson relationship, Hilda Sintumule, a senior in the police service. When she appeared at the commission, there was a very different perception of her to some of the allegations later made against her. I mean, someone like Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, the KZN police commissioner, in fact says she's not as innocent as she's portrayed herself to be in matters related to the seizure of those PKTT dockets, etc.
Well, they cared enough, that is Major General Khan and Advocate Johnson, to check on her during that period. I think it was the COVID period that is being referenced there too, and that suggests also that there was enough care, that they knew each other well enough for them to care about what her current condition is. When she came before the Madlanga Commission, she held a similar view as the Phase 1 witnesses about the disbandment of the PKTT, but when Mkhwanazi went to ad hoc, he wasn't so sure about this particular testimony, and basically gave off those sentiments that she may not be how she portrayed herself before the various committees that were looking at these allegations as per the 5th of July. So it gives you, or rather 6th of July, apologies, it just gives you an indication of the closeness of the relationship and why it seemed at the ad hoc committee that Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi was not buying it. It gives you an explanation as to the kind of dynamics, and we know that a lot of what we hear about is centered around these different alleged factions or groupings within the South African Police Services, and this is just yet another portion of the evidence that gives credence to that.
Shall we go back lastly to Fadiel Adams? That evidence was dealt with earlier when I'm paraphrasing here, there was a sentiment from the witness testimony, Advocate Johnson, that ultimately the institution of charges against the likes of Major General Khumalo was basically used allegedly as a means to protect Adams himself from any sort of criminal investigation or scrutiny related to alleged wrongdoing.
I think the suggestion was that these cases that emanated from the statement were designed to target specific generals, and they would use allegations in the Fadiel Adams statement to springboard themselves into other matters that had nothing to do with what was stated in the original allegation in order to allegedly target these specific generals. We're seeing that Johnson is denying these allegations, saying that there wasn't a target, but the pattern is pointing to selective cases that seemingly only go for Lieutenant General Dumsani Khumalo, General Fani Masemola, and if that Brooklyn SABC warrant of arrest was actually effected on that day, it could have been Lieutenant General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi as well. So it's about testing whether or not there's any merit to the suspicions surrounding IDAC's cases and whether or not this was about ensuring a successful prosecution, or was it about targeting these top cops or generals in order to remove them from their respective roles within the South African Police Services.